Welcome to the channel. My name is Eric, and I thought today we would talk about masking, and what masking means to me and the mental health community in general. So we first need to know what masking is. Well, anyone that is suffering from a mental illness or going through grief or going through extreme sadness and stuff, it's when you put that different face on when you go out in public and people don't see what's really going on inside you. They just see this outward appearance and they think that person's got it all together. When in reality, you may have a person that's extremely sad, anxious, has social phobias, is grieving, or has a mental health condition. Now, grieving and sadness and all that are signs of something going awry. And if you're grieving because you lost someone, or you're grieving because of a broken relationship, or you're sad because of something that has caused you to be that way, then it's less likely to be a mental health issue. Um, I think that a lot of folks go underdiagnosed by their therapist. And what do I mean by that? A therapist is trying to break it down to try to figure out what's going on with you. What's the plan of attack and what's the next direction. All right, you learn the technique of masking, and you get in front of a therapist, and you don't trust that therapist enough to drop the mask, so you leave the mask on because it's kind of like a protection type thing for you, a safety net. Well, that therapist is only seeing the masking side. And I think a lot of times they they don't look for that. They're looking at, in general, how are you doing? How are you coping in life? Now, I know people that are on the outward appearance seem to be coping very well. Whether they're raising kids and families and outings but they're going downward every day that is undiagnosed. And I think that when these individuals go into therapy and get in front of a psychiatrist and don't trust enough to let that mask down, then you're hurting yourself. I mean, I know it's a learned behavior. You've learned to cope by having the mask on because you don't want everybody else to know how you really feel inside. It could be anything, but you're told to grab yourself by the bootstrap and keep plugging along. You're doing fine. You don't need medicines. So, what can the mental health community do to kind of help break down these masks when patients come in front of therapists? When you come in front of therapists, what's it going to take for you to trust enough with your therapist to really let them know what's really going on, of the extreme highs and then the slamming lows, of being afraid in public? See, the downfall, let's just say, what can we do as mental health uh, professionals, which I'm not. I'm speaking on behalf of them, and patients, which I am. What bridge? can be put in place so that we lower the number of undiagnosed individuals that should be on even just a slight medication to help with anxieties and depression and postpartum depression. The list goes on. Well, to me, anyways, I feel like if you're unwilling to take the masks down in front of a therapist, you're not only wasting your time, but you're wasting their time as well. And then as a therapist, if you don't look at each patient when they come through the door and say, is that person wearing a mask or is that person being honest with me? See, sometimes a therapist will feel there's deception, but the wrong kind of deception, like the patient trying to get one over on them. And what they're really picking up on is what's going on behind that mask, that needs to be dealt with. Now, I'm a firm believer, I mean, this is, again, my take, but I'm a firm believer in not going back and reliving your past. I'm a firm believer on getting the proper amount of medication on board so that you're not only socially functioning, you are actually feeling joy, happiness, and back to your old self. So, my best advice would be to everyone involved, don't waste each other's time. I mean, I was just talking to an individual yesterday that said that I feel like my therapist isn't really listening. My therapist isn't saying what's going on with me, and my therapist says that I'm coping very well with issues at hand, so what's the problem? And the first thing I thought of is masking. So you have all this stuff going on. You go to see your therapist, and you're not trustworthy enough to the person that you're talking to lower that mask down to show the inner you that has got, numerous things going on that therapist could really help you with, and a psychiatrist could help you with. See where I'm going? I mean, it all goes back to my general belief, the ground floor, is that no one can get you better but you. You have to take responsibility for your illness, your actions, and then you're the one that's going to have to work to try to fix it with a mental health professional. I'm not saying fix it on your own because you're going in like 50 different directions and you're not sure which one is the biggest issue. Leave that up to the therapist and the psychiatrist. Just go in and maybe write things down before your therapy session of what really going on in your head, of what were you doing when you were feeling you were on a high, and then what were you in the low. I would worry less about diagnoses and more about getting better. The diagnoses, bipolar 1, bipolar 2, schizophrenia, borderline. Don't worry about the diagnoses. That is not what defines you. if you don't feel that the therapist you have is really listening to you and you're being 100% honest with them, find a new therapist. I mean, there are some really good ones and there are some bad ones. You know, they see, they're expected to see, one patient every half hour, every hour. And, they normally meet with them for half hour, 40 minutes, and then they have the rest of the time to write things up for what went on during the session. Some will write it down as they're talking with you or listening to you. Now, for that person that was telling me that they can't afford, medications, even if it's prescribed, or that they can't afford to see a therapist on a regular basis, I did a quick search yesterday on Google, and Google brought up a number of therapists online that there's one that's like $10 a month. And I know also when it comes to medications, based on your financial status and stuff, that, some of these medication pharmaceuticals have programs. Nobody wants to see you not be able to take your meds because you can't afford them. And that's one thing you need to bring up and talk to your psychiatrist. That's the one that's going to write the scripts, or your PA or your nurse practitioner, is let them know that prescriptions are an issue when it comes to financial. Because I think they tend to think most people that have mental health disorders are, either drawing Medicare, Medicaid, what have you. And in the state of New York, Medicaid, they'll pay for, top of the line, where people like you and I, we can only afford the generics. And the generics, honestly, are as good as. So if I can leave you with a few things, find a therapist you can trust. As a therapist, understand that most people that have mental health disorders that come in front of you are masking. And you may have to build trust to get that mask down. And that not to give up on yourself. I mean, it's easy. It's frustrating. But you're worth it. All right. We'll catch you on the next video. I appreciate everything. I appreciate y'all. You guys have a great day.